All right, well, I'd like you to join me in welcoming Ben Nelson, the founder and CEO of the Minerva Project. I'll ask Ben to tell you a little bit about the Minerva Project, but I think broadly cast, the Minerva Project is attempting to create the first new elite university to give the Ivy Leagues a run for their money in a very, very long time. So Ben, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
So I think you maybe just, a minute to explain to the audience exactly how you intend to completely displace the elite university system that currently exists here.
What an easier topic to cover in 60 seconds. So what Minerva is doing, as Shaifali mentioned, is we're trying to create the first elite American university launched since 1891. And one of the benefits of being able to do that in the context of the 21st century and in the context of starting from a clean slate is that you get to rethink a lot of the conventions around what happens. Why do we do things that we do at universities? And we get to think that through the entire student university life cycle. So how do you reform the admissions process? How do you think about a pedagogy and a curriculum that actually has as its purpose not just subject matter education, but also particular student intellectual development on a particular thrust? How do you rethink about the student experience as far as what the nature of where students live, how they interact with the world, what they see, what they experience? And then how do you think about how the institution relates to its graduates, and what is the role of the university when it comes to the success and the future of its students once they graduate, once they have that degree. So you get to rethink those things.
So you and I have discussed, Ben, the fact that people will say, oh, well, people are already delivering education online. There's Coursera, there's all these other initiatives. Why is technology or the innovations in technology relevant to that? Why would you rethink the university in this way?
Sure. So, I think technology is really important. So, as an example, when I first came up with the theories behind Minerva, it was about 20 years ago. And it was in an effort to actually change the pedagogy and curriculum at my university. And a lot of the feedback I got from people was saying, this is great in theory, but it's impossible. We can't actually implement any of these ideas. We can't enforce or we can't create a situation where professors will have data on their students and figure out how you actually customize the intellectual development of each student depending on where they are, what they know, et cetera. It's very hard to coordinate that exchange of information from one class to another in the same semester, let alone semester after semester. It's very hard to manage a curriculum in that way. And today we're able to do that with technology. Online is a vehicle to do that. And in fact, if you look at various forms of education, I think the whole divide between offline and online is actually not a legitimate divide. It's a much more important way to think about things is the difference between knowledge dissemination and intellectual development. And in knowledge dissemination, people like Coursera and Newton and others, and I think Newton's actually even a much better example, really are changing the way that people learn, right? Because, historically you could read a book, you can get information, you could sit in a 500-person lecture and get information conveyed to you, maybe ask graduate students some of your questions. Technology can do a much better job with that. Technology can actually see how you answer your calculus questions, and depending on how many seconds it takes you to begin the process, what you type, when you hesitate, do you delete or do you not, the next question that gets asked to you can be informed by that. That can't be done in a lecture, it can't be done in a breakout session. And so for knowledge dissemination, I think that there's going to be enormous disruption, so much so that the whole concept of the lecture or the book will be dramatically transformed.
Right.
For intellectual development, I think it's very different. I think a class is necessary, but I think the nature of the class needs to change, and that's what we're working on.
So in a sense, and with how you've described Minerva and this idea that it's not going to be just knowledge dissemination. You're not just going to go and sort of interface with your computer to learn calculus or economics. It sounds like you actually have a very traditional notion of the university, the role of the university that's driving. Is that true? I mean, on the one hand, you could say, oh, it's an online, Ivy League university, that's very radical. But is it in fact actually quite a traditional conception?
It is. So it's interesting that you picked up on that. If you look at kind of our pedagogical lineage or parenthood, there really are three institutions that we have traditionally looked for inspiration. So we look at the Chicago curriculum from the 40s and 50s, not in the subject matter that it taught, but in the skills that it engendered in its students. Various ways of looking at the world through rigorous analytical ways, triangulation, the ability to argue all sides of an issue and create the right answer, the way that they practice their communication skills that are multimodal, not just from college level writing, but debate, communications, public speaking, etc. We look at the founding principles of the University of Pennsylvania, what kind of Franklin called the blend of the practical and the ornamental. Right? How do you take subject matter and learning for learning's sake and allow for that to translate to you being able to accomplish something in the world and connect that, really what a classical liberal arts education is supposed to be. And then a more contemporary example is at Caltech. And Caltech is the only elite American university that we know of which has a graduation rate of below 90%. In many cases, below 98%. They graduate about 80% of their freshmen. Now that sounds a little strange. Well, why is that a model? It's a model because they flunk students out. They introduce rigor. There's no grade inflation. And when you do that, you can ensure that the quality of education rises up to living the standards of what Chicago and Penn and other universities in the past have done.
Well, thank you, Ben. That's fascinating. I'm sure we'll hear a lot more in the Q&A.
Thank you, Shaifali. I very appreciate it.